tarot cards are often the first step and basis for a seeker of metaphysical knowledge, like you, to discover your forever path. That could be astrology, numerology, healing arts, or any other spiritual interest you discover along the way. Elaine Ireland is not only a teacher of tarot, she is a mentor who supports you and will be there for you. Visit www.ElaineIrelandTarotMaster.com now and discover how Elaine's mentoring, tarot card and psychic readings, tarot card classes, and more help you to grow into the true being you are meant to be. Welcome to Conversations with the Ancients, where you're about to discover a whole different world than the one that, up until now, you've believed you're familiar with. World-Renowned Metaphysicist, practicing psychic and tarot teacher Elaine Ireland invites you on a journey where you'll hear voices from the past, interviews with some of the greatest metaphysicians you've never heard of, because in their time, they needed to move with stealth. You'll also meet today's spirit mediums, healers, and others who will show you a side of the paranormal you've never seen before. Be sure you visit our website at conversationswiththeancients.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, hear the words of metaphysicians who blazed the trail. You're not in jail, thanks to them.
Kramer Wetzel, everybody. Astrologer extraordinaire. How are you this morning?
Excellent.
I am too. I have so many questions to ask of you. You know, this is part of the ancients, what I'm calling the ancients project, which is a respectful way of acknowledging those of you that have been doing this work for ages. What?
The old people.
The old people, right? The experience, the wise one. The ones that should have white in their hair, but maybe don't, with the help of a dye box or otherwise. But there will be pictures of you. We're not doing this by Zoom, but there will be pictures of you and maybe even some video before it's all said and done. But I'm trying to familiarize people that are maybe new to the community, maybe folks that have been around the community but don't know everybody there is to know, that have been doing this for such a long time. But we've gotten to a point in the metaphysical community, the spiritual community, where I would like to introduce those who have made the way for the practitioners and the public. And you're one of those folks. And you also humanize who we are and how we fit into the overall picture of this thing we call the world. So with that in mind, let's start with, not necessarily the day you were born, but your young adulthood. What did you do before you became a professional astrologer?
I held a variety of positions. I dropped out of college and drifted around the American Southwest, wound up back in Texas working as a bartender briefly, and then got into working on motorcycles, and somewhere between the two, I wound up being in charge of some bars. And from there, that was my first real serious introduction to astrology, because I noticed that there was a correlation between the phase of the moon and the amount of liquid we would sell.
Well, now that's the first time I've heard that.
And that's where I made the connection. Drifted out to New Mexico. I mean, I in and out of Albuquerque for about a year. Then I was wound up in the Phoenix area. Went back to college. I got a degree, and then went to the university there, got another degree. And it was halfway through that bachelor degree in English that I put some stuff together. That's where they talked about, I was in Tempe, which is where the American Council of Astrology or something like that was at the time. American Federation of Astrologers, I don't know, because there's some group out there. And while I was not involved with them directly, it's one of those things that would float around out in the background. And at the same time, I was introduced to Gloucester's wife of Bath, and she talks about she has her hardy constitution, the fact that Taurus is on her ascendant. And that's the first time some of the stuff like tweaked and fell into place. I had a great Shakespeare professor who I enjoyed immensely, because he was extremely traditional, extremely old school, and not really a very good teacher.
Okay.
But I had two takeaways from that. One was he walked through all the plays, or walked through, a handful of the plays, and I would read the plays ahead of time, and then he'd get them, and I would he walked through them. And the other thing that he did, there was some research material that he asked for. That's when I learned about reaching out and getting multiple sources for a particular data point.
Explain that. What do you mean by that?
I would read 3 different reviews of one play, one production of a play. One guy would like it, and one guy would hate it, and one guy would like certain parts about it. It's a matter of realizing that there's different opinions.
Okay.
And that's about Shakespeare, and that's not about astrology per se, but Shakespeare's body of work is just shot through and through astrological references because it was a part of that world.
Folks, if y'all have not read how Kramer writes, you need to do that. Go to his website. What is your website, Judy?
Astrofish.net.
See, I associate the fish and the net together. That's how I recognize it.
And I swing my hips and say, imagine me in fishnet, and it makes everybody laugh because I don't think that's what they want to see.
And if you've never seen how tall and thin Kramer is, you will understand that.
And it's that's where it all started. Now, as for my study of astrology, that changed a little bit because that was not as a direct route.
What took you to the direct route?
I watched one of my first astrology teachers take a look at an astrology chart and reveal information to somebody. It was kind of a casual reading. Watching him do that, I realized that these were the bits and pieces that I had been looking for. And I set about studying astrology.
Okay, bits and pieces that you were looking for. How
Make life make sense?
Okay.
What's our drive? What's our motivation? Why do we do things? Why do we not do things? Why am I attracted to particular people? Why do I resonate with certain people? Why don't I resonate with other people?
We can walk into a room and 5 people in there send off the energy of, come here, come here, come here. I'm okay, I'm safe. 5 more, you know to stay away from them as far as you can get. No.
I should stay away from her. Oh.
Yeah, well, we won't even go there. You're suggesting to the public, just in case they don't know, that because of the way our planets and our astrology signs line up in the heavens, that is a symbiotic with who we can trust and who we can't and who we've got karma with, which we'll get into that discussion in a minute.
Yeah, it's people that the way I said that I resonate with.
Why?
There was an example of this just the other day. A young woman was, a friend of mine brought her to me for consultation. And when she had first walked in the room, I had noticed her. She wasn't outlandishly dressed or anything like that, but it's like there was something about her. Well, it wasn't something about her. It's something in her chart.
Ooh, what's
really? And it was so much fun because both my buddy and me were looking at her going, if we were about 30 years younger, we'd make some very poor decisions about her.
I love that. Poor decisions. Not good decisions, poor decisions.
I did not. Fortunately, we've got age and wisdom. Well, we've got age anyway. I don't know about the wisdom.
Well, yeah, you do. I've known you long enough to know that.
Yeah, that was the most recent example that I can think of. But there's there are a number of times when we encounter people, and it's like they take our breath away for whatever reason. There's always that some people I feel a kinship with and a connection with. It's usually because something lines up in an astrology chart.
I have a question for you as someone who is not an astrologer, although astrology is scattered throughout the tarot, and that's my tool. And I know you read the tarot too. There was a time when we had to talk you into reading and doing a tarot reading, but I think now you're a little more open to sharing your tarot knowledge. But everyone, there's astrology all the way through it. But I think of, and I hear the term fixed signs.
Yeah.
And what's the other term? Muted? Is that the other term?
Mutable.
Mutable.
Cardinal.
And cardinal. Okay. How do those terms and the happening, the sixth sign, does that say the same as that's the destiny stop and you can't get out of it?
No,
Okay, see?
no, not a destiny stop, but it's I mean, no disrespect, Elaine. But my God,
I don't know what's wrong.
it's one of my guidelines is I'm never going to date another Leo.
Oh dear, and I was your Leo, right?
Uh-huh.
I was
It,
your Leo.
but there's reason for that because it's a fixed sign. And while you have many wonderful qualities, Leo tend to be not as amenable to change as
Oh, now, wait a minute. Oh, wait. We're going to back up on that. As
not talking about you statistically. As a Leo, you take great umbrage with that, and you're going to stand by that and say, "I'll change anytime I want to."
no, I really am asking. I'm getting ready to get into an astrological discussion because I am a Leo, yes. And yes, there are certain things in my life that here is the line in the sand, and you're not crossing it. Neither am I. However, I grew up in a military background home where change was forced upon us in the form of where your dad was assigned, where you lived, what schools you went to, yada yada yada. It was absolute. So being born a Leo, either I had to learn how to adjust to that, or be really unhappy and be a stinker about it. I chose to adjust to it without even giving it a second thought.
But you also knew it was coming every 2 years. You'd be reassigned.
Well, maybe, but I still could have been pissy about it. Pardon my language, public.
Yeah.
I could have been really unhappy. I could have thrown temper tantrums. I could have insisted on going home and living with my grandmother. I mean, even as a kid, I could have done that. But instead, one of the traits of a Leo is to enjoy social life and to be the hostess and all that sort of thing. Enjoy travel, enjoy new things, being very creative. So even this fixed sign enjoyed the absolute it will not change energy of my mother having married a military man. So what other signs would have been in my chart that would have allowed me that, or was that, as I just described it, part of being a Leo, so I didn't drive myself crazy?
Part of it's being a Leo. Part of it, you've got both the fixed sign for your sun sign and for your moon sign. But from recollection, you also have a great deal of not mutability, but cardinal stuff in your chart. So you're good at starting new stuff.
Okay, so that tells me.
If I were to back you into a corner and say this is an absolute, you would fight me on it. If we say, hey, let's go try this over here, you go, sure, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, I'm all for trying new things. Okay, getting back to you. When you were a young man and you were floating around and you were doing your thing and being the young man and enjoying life, getting to know what life was all about, and you came upon these opportunities, had I taken that class with that particular professor, I may have enjoyed it, but that didn't necessarily mean that it would send me down the road of astrology or doing charts. Did astrology feel comfortable to you? Yeah,
there's a science to it and there's an art to it. And I also came in, one of the big clues about what I do now is I came into all of this backwards.
Okay. Wow. What do you consider backwards?
I started out, my degree's in English, but I was supporting myself by doing computer consulting.
Self-taught?
Yeah, self-taught. And while I've had several classes in astrology, a lot of what I have is self-taught too, but we'll get to that, I guess, a little bit later. The consulting gave me a background for learning how to do some of this stuff. I learned about how to work with people as a consultant. Okay, it's essentially hand-holding people while they do stuff on their computer. I don't have time for it now, and I don't have time or patience for it at this point. But I started out because we were looking for programs that we would do astrology charts. And then I learned the power of looking at the chart and understanding the person that the chart represents it, and the connections between their life and what's going on. And my original plan was to sell astrology charts, not to do readings, but to sell astrology charts. Then I discovered it was more fun to do some of the readings.
No, wait. How would you just sell astrology charts? Somebody called up like me and I need you to
don't have I don't have an answer for that because
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
No, I was the original goal was to sell reports online via a website, and I kind of pioneered some of that material. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I started out by just doing the charts themselves because that was something that interested me.
Okay. It was also a teaching tool for yourself.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a technical side to it, doing the calculation, doing the math.
But then didn't you have, I remember probably in the old days, pre-Kramer days, everything was done mathematically by hand.
Yeah.
Uh,
I've done a couple of charts by hand, and it takes me 2 hours to do the math.
Just the math.
And that's just an approximation. I can do that, and I can do a chart now as fast as it takes me to type the info in.
Wow.
I can do a chart on my phone these days. Not really a big deal. I've been able to do that for 20 years.
That's amazing to me. That's amazing to me. It just blows my mind away.
Now, with that in mind, the way I backed in is I was going to do this from the computer side. I was going to have the computer draw up the chart. That was going to be my business. I also, these are computers that were not, this is pre-laptops.
Oh my God, we're giving.
Yeah. Well, and so with it being pre-laptop, I wanted something that I could carry with me. And I've been given I've also bought my first set of tarot cards in Santa Fe in about 1990.
Oh, where did you find them?
It was a little shop that sold crystals and crap,
Crystals and crap.
And it was a new age metaphysical bookstore / head shop, incense and pipes and all sorts of other things. Anyway, I got them there, and that's when I started, I was working with it, and it didn't click. And I was given another set of tarot cards, and I still have the Thoth deck that I really, really like.
Yeah, the top.
It has, on the bottom of each card, each of the regular minors, there's an astrology sign, planet. And that gave me, I would be doing a card reading, somebody say, when is something going to happen? And I could correlate the two pretty easily. Oh, that's going to happen in June. Why? Because that's a Gemini card, and that's when June is. When Gemini is. What I did then, that's when all the astrology stuff that I did studying and couldn't quite bring it all together. That's when it all started to come together.
Do you remember the first chart you ever did for someone who actually said you to do it, or just asked you to do it?
No.
Okay, I thought maybe it might have been somebody.
I remember producing a chart and watching my then roommate at the time, a guy became a teacher for me, doing the chart. And I remember she was originally a woman from Texas. We were in Arizona at the time. But that's when watching that is when I realized the power and the efficacy of what it was we could do. I remember my first time I got a reading from somebody, they told me not to do something. I went ahead and did it. Found out that they were right in the first place. That's when everything started to come together. That's when it all started to make sense. And I had decanted to South Austin by then, and I had worked at a number of events just as a tarot card reader, but it's like I could see that I was inching towards astrology.
I never knew you did that just as a tarot reader.
You what?
I never knew that you did just tarot readings at the fairs.
At the very first fairs, yes.
Yeah.
St. Angelo, and that was Julie. But then I worked with Appleseed for a while. By the way, I wrote my first horoscope about 1987. I still have those someplace. And I didn't start producing them on a regular basis until 1993. I did it monthly from 93 to 95, and then by 1995, middle of 1995, I was doing a weekly. That's what I had the most fun with.
You were writing all of that time. Have you kept everything that you've written? I mean,
pretty much. I'm pretty much all available on the website now.
I was gonna ask you, that was in my notes, to ask you where folks can find your book.
And the books are astrofix.net/books.
Okay.
It's just English way to get it, but they're probably need to do something new. But the books are especially Barefoot Astrology. I did Barefoot Astrology because it goes back to the computer consultant. I had a client who did something about brick walls, and I included that in Barefoot Astrology. That was some of my original thinking about this. What do you do when you come up against a fixed, immovable object, like a brick wall? One of the things I had fun doing was describing how each sign would approach that brick wall.
And I loved that. I laughed when I read it and thought, oh my gosh.
But that was about 94, 95 was one of the first times I taught a class. It would have been 94, and I was so nervous the first time I did it. I had notes and a PowerPoint presentation and everything like that all ready to go. You know what? As soon as I started talking about it, I know this material backwards and forwards. It's not a problem.
I've never known you to be nervous in front of a group of people.
No, you never seen me be nervous in front of a group of people.
So who are you talking to? I would know if you were nervous.
There's always a little flutter.
Kramer, when you were going through this, you dropped some dates. You dropped some years. Those were okay, let me back up. Back in the 60s and 70s, until the Love Children came around, it was not cool to do what we do.
Right.
The public is more aware now than they've ever.
Tarot cards were evil.
Oh, yeah. And astrology was a bunch of hooey. And
yeah.
I don't think people even knew about Reiki and acupuncture and acupressure at that time, unless you lived in a state or a city where it was practiced openly, but it wasn't licensed. They had to operate out of a doctor's office or a chiropractor's office. But that was a scary time for a lot of us. We were under the laws of fortune telling, and we could literally be arrested if it was on the book, which, by the way, it still is on the books in Austin, Texas. But you dropped those dates, and I thought that was interesting because I automatically went back to those times where it was more open, but still kind of scary, where your name was privately passed around a group of people. And that could be an office building, it could be a neighborhood, but many of us didn't even have a business card. I didn't have a business card until my late 30s.
My business card now is very simple because I have my name and some contact information, but it doesn't say astrologer.
See, that's what I'm going back to. In fact, the card that's being designed right now has a simple vine, and at the end of the vine, it has an E on it, and it's going to have my name and my phone number.
All right.
I might have Thoreau Master on it. I might not. I don't know. It's more. I grew up with calling cards, and I want it to look like a calling card.
All right.
So it's time. What I'm getting at is that time seemed to be going back to that in a way that it's all of a sudden. IRS has gotten involved in a lot of this. Taxes has gotten involved in creating a little bit of fear for us because we are under the guise of entertainment. And so many of us have worked for so many years and spent so much money studying, and we know what this is, and this is not just plain entertainment. It is consulting. In the state of Texas, back in the 80s, maybe, the therapists, the counselors, the social counselors made it a law that said, unless you hold a degree, go ahead.
Unless I'm not a lawyer, so you can't take this as legal advice.
Right.
But it's my understanding that in the state of Texas, if you don't have at least a master's in counseling, you cannot call yourself a counselor.
Right. And it can't be on your card.
Right.
So
and there's a loophole for us where you're a
reverend.
A reverend, you can call it pastoral counseling, and it falls under the care of pastoral counseling.
I don't even have that on my card.
I don't have it say reverend on my card, but I got my first reverend license in the early 70s.
I did too. And I did it so that I could do hands-on healing. And
exactly.
Which I used to do a lot of, and I can marry people.
Yeah.
But I've never taken advantage of any of the discounts or anything like that, and I haven't done hands-on healing in a long time. So I do healing, but I just don't do it. I used to have a table set up in my home, but I don't do it anymore. But your work even an astrologer has to be protected legally, like all of us do. So you were wise to do that.
Right.
And were there other fears that you recognized or grew into as you became the astrologer that you are today and built a reputation? Like, did you lose friends? Because there's more to using our tools. Astrology, numerologist, I don't care what you are. Those are tools. Those are metaphysical, spiritual tools. But when we incorporate them as practitioners, like anything else, we change as we grow into it. When you were going through that metamorphosis, did you notice a stunning energy or people walking away or saying you were crazy or any of that? And how did you handle it, if you did?
One Christmas, early 90s, I was with my large extended family on my mother's side. And I looked around at my sister and myself. And my sister is a California-based found object puppetry performance artist.
Wow.
That's a handful. Okay.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, has a Ivy League degree in engineering. All right. Got all that. Now, as an example, when I looked around at that family gathering, I realized that we were the weird ones. We're the weird aunt and uncle for those kids. We're the strange family members. We're the whatever you want to call it. We're from the other side of the track, or the other reality. And that's when it's like, instead of worrying about it, I said, no, that's what it is.
Where did you
the oddballs in the family.
Do that, to say that? Because that's like being the black sheep of the family, and accepting who you are, which for us is really, really hard. We've buried ourselves for so long. But
when I landed in Austin, my income dropped in half that year, and my standard of living doubled.
That's Austin.
And it was the old Austin. I don't know if it happened now, but they embraced it. And it's like, I got to Austin, it's like everything was just fine. My astrologer, cool. Hey, my moon is in Taurus. What does that mean? Instead of, oh, you're one of them.
Yeah.
Yep. I've joked about this, but we worked on a circuit that swung to most of West Texas, and part of the Bible Belt is out there, at least a notch in it. And I used to get this thing where people would look at me and they'd go, that weird guy asked me my birthday. Then he's from Austin. Oh, okay. Carte blanche. You can do anything you want. That's when I became comfortable with it. It's like the other little piece to this. It's a missing piece, I believe, that what you're looking for is I was a consultant, as a computer consultant, self-employed computer consultant, which means I was used to being paid piecemeal by the job. But it was programming something or essentially babysitting secretaries and how to use their computers. But I was paid piecemeal by it. I was used to that, and I was used to filing taxes like that. So I call it all consulting. I call what I do consulting. I just shifted from being a computer consultant to being a consultant. So it says in my RS form, it's consultant. Now, again, Greg, they haven't so far. And it's because I also report all my income, blah, 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 and pay taxes and everything else. Yeah. Good luck, that.
I pay taxes too, but I have an LLC, so
I
pay everything under that.
Yeah. I've looked at doing another LLC, and it's like, at this point, it's too much trouble, and I'm at the tail end of this career. And so I'm wrapping things up. I'm not trying to expand more.
You're comfortable where you are, and you can pick and choose with who you want to work with.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's important. That's why this group that I'm wanting to interview is so important, is because so many of you folks are in your 50s and 60s and 70s and older. Mm-hmm. And even if you're in your 60s, you've been at this for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And you've done thousands and thousands and thousands of readings. You've read or written hundreds of books, and you have a lot to share with the world from young folks that are finding a way into this. And so much has changed, because when I started, we didn't have Facebook. We didn't have whatever platforms that there are out there now. We had to do everything one client at a time.
Right.
And when I was asked to do group reading, I was always worried who's in the group.
Yeah.
Is there a police officer in the group? Is there a pope in the group? Who's in the group? And would ask my host or hostess. And when I started doing them openly, like you and so many others have in hotel rooms where you have 200 people come in, it was scary. But it was a form of advertising. And speaking of that, we couldn't advertise in the Austin American-Statesman. They put healers in the same group with our massage therapists, in the same group with, what do they call those parlors?
Yeah.
And it took legal action for the not to be advertised, lumped in, just like the book, whether it was an astrology book, a numerology book, a self-help book, or whatever, it was all put in Wiccan, not Wiccan, but the witchcraft section.
Yeah.
Which at that time was, like you said, scary. And we had to fight to make that happen. We had to get the negative and positive separated. And I don't mean to call all of that, because we've got Wiccan, which is, if you have a Wiccan friend, you have a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful friend. If you have somebody that's practicing the dark arts, good luck. Not okay.
The dark arts are not limited to just Wicca. You can find it in a lot of different branches.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. But if somebody's trying to manipulate you, that's not okay. But getting back to your development, did you find it as, how can I ask this? Did you find it was an easy flow from one level to the next? Or did you step back and go, what the heck is that, and what am I walking into?
I had a real good lesson, because, and it was one of the things we do is we work for 900 lines. This is back 25 years ago, almost 25 years ago at least. And the 900 lines did not have a good reputation then. They don't have a good reputation now. I think I got I don't remember, but it wasn't very, it was maybe 50 cents a minute, and they were charging $3.50 a minute, something like that.
I remember those days, yeah.
But anyway, one of the part of what was going on at that time was that it was like a great training ground for me, because for me to be comfortable with myself, I had to make sure that I kept that phone reading to about 10 minutes. All right. Of course, $40 in $1990 is a whole lot more than $40 is today.
Oh, yeah.
Never mind that part now. It was, I had to do something that I was comfortable with, that I was karmically comfortable with, that I was metaphysically comfortable with. And it was great, because what I did, there was at one point, I was available for phone calls like about 45 hours out of the week. I was just talking on the phone for over 40 hours. And there were a couple of periods in there where I made just a fistful of dollars. The other thing that I learned from that is how to really get rapidly to the point. Okay? Start out with, what's your first name? What's your birthday? Where were you born? Any idea what time you were born? And then start talking before I even had a chance to get everything out. And that helped a whole lot.
You're not the first one that I've heard say that about the lines. I worked the lines for a while too, off and on. And you have to get to the points. They take the 3 minutes, get a minute free, and they expect to get everything as much as they can, and rightfully they should. So you do learn how to do it quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was fun about that was watching. That helped me learn to tune in, so to speak, psychically, intuitively, whatever you want to call that.
Thank you for bringing that up. That was my next question. How did you know that?
And it's one of those things that this is a skill set that's acquired. It's a skill set that's acquired by, lots of practice. I got lucky because I got paid to practice.
I hadn't thought of it that way, but it is. I realize that they're a great training ground. Like psychic stairs are a great training ground. But when you're working for a psychic line where somebody can actually turn the switch off, and the customer has to leave satisfied because they've already prepaid, you do learn. And the ethics and all of that is really, really important.
Right. it was the ethics that were important to me. I made some mistakes and I had some problems and caused headaches, at least one heartache at one point. But it's some of this you get over. I use this as a training ground. I called it working in the psychic, in the trenches.
Oh, amen. Good term.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Good term. I use the lines as a fill-in.
Yeah.
I worked for the original line out of California, the man, I can't think of his name now.
Yeah.
And then when they changed, he folded out, and boy, could you tell the difference.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, overnight,
Mm-hmm.
you could tell the difference. But I've worked technically for 3 different lines, and they've all had different energy, but
Yeah.
and different times in our life. I think if you were working that line now, you would probably be making tons and tons of money and be very busy, but in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd have a different level of clientele.
Yeah.
But they are still training grounds because you know as well as I do that we are constantly learning, we're constantly growing. Everybody is, but especially when you do this work, whatever your tool or no tool is, even if you can hold somebody's hands and it's a psychic reading, we're constantly learning and constantly getting better.
Right.
What is your next step? What are you going to do? You say you're at the tail end of your career. What will you do next? I can't imagine you not.
I really, one of the things that's important is I really enjoy what I do. And I've been blessed to stumbled into a good promoter here that I can work with. And I will continue to work at her shows because it keeps me entertained. But I have to remember, when I'm working in San Antonio, it's different than working in Austin.
Different energy, that's for sure.
Entirely different. I have to stop and assess because what would fly in Austin, some of my commentary is very tame in Austin, by Austin standards, but it's a little bit outlandish here.
But that's the way it is in a lot of places. And working in Midland, Odessa area is very different than working in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know where I'm going for here. I don't have a set destination. I just released during the pandemic. I released a little book of astrology transits, and I've been working with one of my long-term clients recently. And it's like some of the stuff in the book just covers exactly what is going on in her life. Like, you don't need me to read the book.
You know, I was going to ask you about this later, but now that you've opened that door, excuse me, looking at a chart for, say, let's tone it down, the United States.
Right.
Would there have been a chance for you or anyone else looking for it, and we do this public. We have here in Austin at our January fairs, which is usually the first weekend in January, the night before the fairs, we'll have a predictions panel. And there's usually an astrologer, a numerologist, a psychic or two, experienced people, and not always the same. But could anyone have picked up the pandemic and spotted it as a medical issue, not just earthquakes and hurricanes and that sort of thing, but can a chart be set so that you could tell we've got a medical challenge to the degree that we would have with the pandemic? If you had asked.
I've, right before the pandemic started, I finally got tapped by the Austin Astrology something society or some group, and they asked me to come in and present about the transits coming up for 2020.
Okay, transits, explain that term to the public.
Where the planets were going to be.
Okay.
What the flavor, what kind of predictions I would have for 2020. And my predictions for 2020 were all upbeat and hopeful and happy and healthy, that sort of thing. But there was one note that I had in there that we have a tremendous amount of that fixed energy again. And that fixed energy means that we have to deal with issues that we thought we had dealt with, and that we had swept under the carpet. They're back. That we get avoided, they're back. That we get ignored, they're back. That was one of the things that I covered in that presentation, and I didn't go over real well. And at least one other person did predict, earthquakes and floods and stuff like that. And I said, well, it's a metaphorical flood, which is a fancy way out of it. Right?
Okay. Say that again, because I'm afraid somebody won't really hear that the way you mentioned.
They said, yeah, they predicted it's easy to predict bad stuff. It's hard to predict good stuff. A lot of people are predicting bad stuff from this, and it's like, if you predict enough bad stuff, when bad things happen, like I say, I told you so.
Could you have predicted if I had asked you, is this medical, or is it warlike, or is somebody had pressured you, pushed you, could you have been more identical? And could a chart have said, it will start in Asia, it will start in Europe, it will land in America in the fall, in spring? Can a chart see that?
There is bound to be one out there who made that prediction. Okay?
One what? You cut out.
There's bound to be one person out there who has made that prediction.
Okay.
But what I would have predicted is that we have to, issues that we have to deal with, maybe we have to deal with this on an individual basis. And that showed us as for us being locked up in the pandemic.
Boy, did it ever.
Yeah. And I got at least two that really can't stand it. My sister being one, because we use the term extreme extrovert. And it did not work for her at all.
I wasn't real crazy about it. Another Leo that was not crazy about it.
Yeah.
But
anyway,
we also have clients I had 2 clients that became millionaires out of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because it forced them to focus on their business.
Right.
It forced them to focus. Maybe I should rephrase that. One shut down his business, but he was able to take care of his employees, thank God. The other one altered the business. It evolved into something that he had been thinking about for 2 years. Well, this was the perfect time for him to do it.
That's the people who are able to pivot. Read whatever the message is and adjust appropriately is what worked. I went from doing in-person readings to doing everything on the phone.
Yeah, I've had to do that. Yeah, I've done that.
I was running my website as a pay-per-view website, a subscription-based model, and months into the pandemic, said, "Nah, forget this." I had hundreds of people who hadn't paid, and it's like, I'll just make it free. I don't care. And I have not suffered.
Well, what you get from the heart comes back tenfold. You know that.
Mm-hmm.
People needed all the help they could get.
Yeah.
I started, if somebody only called for a question or two, and it really didn't go over more than 10 or 15 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
which is usually our psychics there, they say, well, how much do I owe you? And I say, take what you can afford and give it to a food bank or to your basic charity. I'd rather do that than have them put it on PayPal, and PayPal take a ridiculous amount of money out. And then it just, by the time the $45, which is what I would charge for a 15-minute reading as a fair, half of it's gone by the time it hits the bank. I'd rather all 45 or 50 or whatever they're going to do go to a food bank. I mean, It didn't make any sense to me to do it other than that. So when we're looking at particulars, I've had people tell me, I'm going to Italy in October.
Mm-hmm.
What's it going to be like in Italy in October? I would have to depend on my cards, and I would have to depend on my psychic ability. But from a chart, would you be looking at their information and or Italy? How would you handle that on a chart?
I would just look at their information and see what things are.
Okay.
I would also look to see if they're going to go to, they were going to go to Italy, if Italy would be open. There are a couple of things that there are a couple of obvious significators in a chart that talk about foreign travel. I've watched for that.
You know, I have to ask at this point, the door seems to be open for it. You have your tool and it's absolute. The planets are where they are. The meaning of the planet on a chart, right? I mean, all of the planets of the chart are fixed, whether they're mutable or whatever. They're fixed in their own way, but they have a meaning in the houses that they fall in.
Yeah.
With that in mind, you know all that information, so you can take that science, if I may call it your science. But
that much is science, where they are science.
But you also use your psychic ability. And I'm old-fashioned. I really am. I'm hard-nosed in some ways about our tools. I believe they are a tool, but not the only thing that a metaphysician or a psychic or whoever, whatever you want to call us, uses when we are of being service to the public. So I've watched you grow over the years, and I know you use your science ethically and honestly and to your best of your ability. But I also have watched you and heard you use more psychic ability. Are you comfortable with that growth and sharing that with the public? And do you let them know, I'm sensing, I'm feeling, I'm being told?
No.
I'm putting you in the
yes, I am comfortable sharing it. I'm not comfortable when I'm dealing with one-on-one with a client. I say, well, this is what this means. Okay. And every once in a while, I will get some very clear message. And I say, okay, this isn't on your astrology chart. This is just coming to me.
Okay. So that's how you differentiate.
Yeah. Or if I pull out cards, they insist on cards, and I pull those out.
I notice they're on your table more often now. I'm just doing the fairs. Are you ready for the fair? Well, you're doing it.
I'm doing San Antonio these days, so it's been great because it's been a very limited engagement. It's been nice.
Well, those are one-day fairs. You're fortunate to live in the area. That's good. Really.
That's the beauty of it. So.
When I was doing the one-day fairs, I would go down with Tracy in San Antonio, and it was always fun because I'd just go to her house and we'd go from there to get. So it's kind of like a world trip for one day, and it was always fun to see everybody, busy or not. That's one of the things I think the public doesn't realize about us is that as a group, so many of us traveled together over the years. Yeah. Kramer and Linda Drake and her husband and me and Yanni Brewer used to load up in her Tahoe, and Pat her husband, Linda's husband, would, who wouldn't let anybody else drive, would take us to El Paso and do fairs, and we'd share rooms and all sorts of things. But we would also follow others like Thomas Nolan and gosh, I can't even remember now. Did you do the Colorado fairs with us? I don't remember.
No, I didn't do Colorado.
And that's a whole nother group of psychic people because Texas and vendors, Texas goes to Colorado. You've got a lot of the American Indian population that literally will come out of the mountain after the winter. And other people from close nearby states. Like, well, there's even a lady from Castle, Wyoming there one time. So it's a different group of people, just like it would be different if they would come here. Or go to New Mexico, or I've worked in Tennessee and New Mexico and Colorado and Oklahoma, and we've all worked. So many of us literally followed each other everywhere to the body, mind, and soul. And you meet the same people, but that would be the only time, unless you were fortunate enough to, like Kramer and I and Yanni and all that live close, we could get together in 5 hours probably or less. But so many of those people, some of our dearest friends live in Oklahoma. But the only time we see them is at fairs.
Right.
So I don't think the public realizes the human side of us. Does that make sense? We have a memory.
One of my great realizations, and I've joked about this one because I have so much fun with it. And one of the things that I point out, we're all looking for a tribe. And it was back in the late 90s, and one of the it might even have been a CPA fair, for all I recall.
Yeah,
and I look around, that's digging. But it's like I was looking around and going, I realized who my tribe was. It was all the people on this side of the table.
Yep.
These are my people.
Yep. For those of you that may or may not have ever been to a psychic fair, quite often, regardless of the size of the room, the vendors that sell wonderful merchandise is usually in the middle of the room. Sometimes if it's a big hotel or whatever, they may be scattered about in the lobby area. But the readers are generally with their backs to the wall. In the corners, there may be the bigger readers like massage therapists or candle workers or something like that need a bigger space. And then sometimes you'll have readers scattered in the center of the room amongst the vendors or a group away from the vendors. So that's what he means when he says on this side of the table. And that's very true. Yeah.
That's when I realized that all the readers, that was my family, my group, my soul group, my whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I refer to friends and folks that I've met and become close to as my soul family.
Yeah.
And soul sisters and soul brothers and soul family. And they're the same group of people that you cannot see for 2 or 3 years and you picked up where you left off. Right. So, and you want to know what they've learned while you haven't been together. That's one thing about this community. We are all so... What have you learned? Where did you go? What kind of meditations did you create? What book did you write? Or we're all excited about. I can't wait to get back together. I'm hoping that the city of Austin will truly allow us to have a fair in July.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up. But before we do, goodbye for now. And share a smile with somebody today.
Thank you for tuning into The Conversations with the Ancients, where we take you on a journey where you'll hear voices of metaphysicians from the past, as well as today's spirit mediums, healers, and others who show you a side of the paranormal you've never seen before. Remember to visit our website at conversationswiththeancients.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on Conversations with the Ancients.